Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel of crafting, crochet and knitting. My name is Nikki. How are you guys doing? As always, let me know in the comments down below. I'm doing okay. So since last week I was telling you about how I was in a bit of a lull because I had a lot of big projects, big jumper projects, which were kind of stopping me from getting into some other crafting and feeling like a bit of a block. And I'm pleased to say that I've been making a lot of headway with that. So I've been focusing on the cable jumper. I'm nearly there with getting the sleeves finished, and I can then stitch that together and show you guys, so I can't wait for that. I actually took a couple of days off the grey jumper as well and started and finished another quick simple project, because when I was going through my yarn, there were a few yarns that I just remember having got and loving so much and can't wait to work with them. That I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start a new project, but I'm going to finish it because it's a quick project. So it took me about 2 days. The yarn was as beautiful to work with as it felt like it was going to be. But I'm going to save that. I'm going to talk about that in a different video. Because at the moment, I don't have much progress to show you. I want to be able to show you kind of like a bit of a bigger chunk of progress. So I'm going to save that for another time. And I'm just going to go through some equipment today that isn't specifically for crochet, it's not specifically for knitting, but it has helped me a lot just in the quality of my products and also the quality of my experience of crochet. So you guys know that I don't use like really expensive yarns, you know that I don't use really expensive kit. That can sometimes mean that, you know, you're at a bit of a disadvantage. Not completely. I personally am fine with that. Some people prefer to have a much smoother experience. I've never had a problem. But I do have some things that do make my life easier. So I want to stop blabbering and just get on and show you. So the first thing is not really something that's going to make your life easier, but it is something that make your projects really cute when you gift them to somebody. So I've actually got some labels that I'm going to reuse. So they do have a name on one side of them, but I'm going to stick them together and reuse them. I know that sounds really terrible, but like I'm a fan of reusing and recycling and stuff, so that's going to be done. But I do also have these ones, which my husband got me for Christmas, and they're really, really, really cute. Look at that. I love you nearly as much as I love crochet. There's all such different slogans in here. Oh, this one's a bit more sassy. So this one says, "This took forever to make," like literally. So, you know, if you have that relationship with somebody where they know how much effort goes into your craft and you just want to be like, yeah, I love you, so I put this effort into making you the project, and I'm just going to be sassy about admitting it. Another sassy one here. So I made this, so yes, you have to pretend to like it. There's some sassy ones, and then there's some like nicer. There's some less sassy ones in there. I keep finding the sassy ones though. Here we go. If you don't like this, can I have it back? Yeah, so they're really cute. There are slogans in there which are sort of like more of a just like, I made this for you, I hope you like it kind of thing. But other than that, there's quite a lot of sassy ones. I do have some people in my family that I could totally be that sassy with, and they'd understand, so it's all good. So the next thing is my pot of stitch markers. I cannot stress enough how much stitch markers are amazing. Now, you can buy little plastic stitch markers, or you can use like scraps of yarn. I personally like the little stitch markers, and I don't feel too bad about having bought plastic, because usually it comes in a kit and it's just like, yeah, great, I need those. So I don't feel too bad about it, but also because I use them as well. I think that's the important thing. Like, if you've just got erroneous plastic packaging that you don't need, then it's not great, but if you've actually got stuff that you're using, then that's helpful. So these are the stitch markers. Typically there, I've got a couple of packets there. You can see how these are packs of 10, so you can see how much I'm using them at the moment. They are stuck in those jumper projects, but in particular, I think I've spoken before when I was going through my jumper about how dividing off the sections of the jumper made it much easier to follow the pattern. So that makes my life so much easier. You can get metal ones. Now these are pretty sharp. And I mean, obviously they are an alternative if you don't want to get the plastic ones. There are these little metal ones. I use these in sock knitting because the yarn is finer, and so this goes through those stitches far easier than something like these chunky. See how chunky those plastic bits are. So I wouldn't dream of putting those ones into my sock. I use these ones instead. But you can literally just use and I have in the past used before I got some stitch markers, just safety pins, exactly the same thing. I've got a whole pack of little plastic ones as well because they were super cheap and there's loads in them. So when I did my orange shawl, I'm not sure I've like properly showed you that, but I have worn it. When I did that, there was so many sections to it, and when I was casting on the stitches, there were quite a lot of stitches that I was dividing sort of every 20 stitches off with one of those. So stitch markers are definitely something that make the crochet and the knitting experience easier. Now, people will tell you that these ones are crochet stitch markers because they hook, and knitting ones are just little rings that you slide on and off the hook, but if you close these, they're a ring. So I will preferentially get these ones because I can use them for knitting and crochet. And the last thing that is just in here because I've got nowhere else to store it are these. These are little bobbins. So if you've ever wondered how do I wind my scraps, there are techniques you can use where, you know, wrap it around your fingers and then you can start winding it into a ball. But if you don't know how to do that, you can just use these. These came in a kit. I don't use them very frequently because I know how to wind the scraps into a ball. But if you've got like such a small scrap that you can't wind it into a ball, then these can work. Also, if you're winding something off to use in a project, you can then stick it on a bobbin instead, so that it doesn't sort of roll around as much. So yes, that's my little pot of stitch markers predominantly. Then I've got my little pack. I'm working my way up to the big stuff, don't worry. I've got my little pack here. So this has got some scissors, standard scissors. There is no need to go buy special scissors. Like, some people will charge you extra for teeny tiny scissors. You don't need teeny tiny scissors. So normal scissors. I've got a few different pairs of scissors. I keep the sort of mid-sized ones in my like my knitting and my crochet bags, and I've got like much smaller ones that came in kits that I will then stick with my sewing stuff. Now, some of you might be aware of these. These come in a lot of kits, and typically they're a bit naff. They don't cut very well. Let me show you. So here they are. This is all they are. If I can angle this correctly with the camera, you can see that if I close it, you've got that gap there. That gap is why they don't cut, okay? Because you're not getting the right pressure, the right tension onto a piece of yarn to actually make the sharp edges cut it. Here's my pro tip. As well as cutting that way, push them in with, like, squeeze it with your hand so that when you close it, see how that gap is gone. So if I squeeze and clip at the same time, you can even hear them going across each other more. That will then cut the yarn. So these are not great, and I think some people throw them out, but if you just do that squeezing as well as cutting, you'll get a clean cut. That's my tip. Okay, here is another tip. Nail file. So I know that there are a couple of guys who do yarn crafts following this. They might not have come across this before, but your nails will split, like, and by that I mean, like, you might have just, like, there's layers in your nails, and so the top layer might have come off and the bottom layer hasn't. That will make roughness on your nails, and that roughness, your yarn is going to catch on as you're working. So nail file with your crochet or your knitting stuff, or any yarn craft that you do. If you ever have any of those sort of snags on your nails, just give them a quick file down, and then you can do your project and you're not going to get any snagging. So that's why I have a nail file in my kit. I also sometimes keep like hand cream with my kit so that I can really easily just like sort of every now and then give my hands some hand cream to stop them from getting too dry from working with the yarn. Tape measures. I've been told that you should always check the size of your tape measures because sometimes the fabric ones like kind of stretch and stuff, and so you're not getting a true millimeter or centimeter. So it might be worth doing that, but most kits that you get will come with little fabric tape measures like that. We've got here, some of these are out on a project at the moment. This is one I've got spare. Little stitch or row counters. I will do it for stitches or rows depending on what I need in a project. So typically rows, because I've sort of know how to count my stitches. But yeah, these are great. So if you're doing a longer project and you just want something to make it mindless when it comes to counting your rows, and you don't want to just like go and recount them all the time, this is a good way to keep track. I'm still going, guys. Okay. Needles. For darning those horrible, horrible ends. I've got a couple of types here. I've got these big, big yellow ones. Now, pro is that they've got these really big eyelets. Con is that they've got really stumpy ends. So actually an Aran yarn or a chunky yarn is good for this because the actual stitches are more open as well, so that I can get those thick ends through the stitches without splitting the yarn, but I can also get the yarn through the eye, which is the big problem with things like these metal ones. So these are some of my favourite metal ones because they've got these big eyes. They do have sharper edges than the plastic ones, but still quite blunt. Something like this isn't going to work on a sock yarn. So I do have some much finer ones for when I'm sewing the sock ends in. These ones are my typical though. So these are great for DK. Nice big eyelets, not too thick, not too blunt at the ends here. So these are really good for DK, light DK, and even Aran will work with this. So this is my go-to needle size. I've got some of these in kits before, so all these green ones came in the little like Aldi Aragorimi kits, and then the red ones and the purple ones came in separate kits as well. So if you can get hold of those, I don't know that you can like buy them by themselves, so you'd need to get a kit or something, but I was very willing to buy a kit for the sake of one of these needles. And I do have some typical kit rulers in here. Mostly use these for rulers because you can't really get crochet hooks through these holes. You can only get knitting needles through those holes. So you can measure your knitting needles with these, but I've also found that like the size slightly varies in these as well, so it's kind of not worth it. It's better to know what your needles are, just like through some sort of mark on them. Yeah, so I'm not going to put everything back in the back now because otherwise I'm going to run out of time to show you the bigger things. So this here is my yarn bowl. I absolutely loved this. These can be quite expensive. I actually found this from a not a discount store, but like a gift store, and they just had a time where they did loads of yarn stuff and they had these in stock, and it was like £4 and it's really good. It's nice and smooth in here, so my yarn doesn't snag on it or anything. If I've got balled up yarn and it's just rolling all over the place on my desk, it's really infuriating. Sticking one of these, I'm good to go. So absolutely love that. Made my life so much easier. This one is going to seem really weird, but a set of scales, because when you're working with yarn, you kind of want to know how much you're using. But when you're working with sock yarn in particular, I was finding I was buying these 100-gram skeins and they were self-striping, and you want your stripes to line up, right? Or is that just me? I wanted them to line up. So I was then taking those 100-gram balls and I was rewinding them into two 50-gram balls using my scales and using my yarn winder, which I'm going to show you in a second, and making sure that I had a start point which was like the same length of pattern. So it wouldn't be exactly 50-50 because of that. It would be like 53 to 47, that kind of thing. But I was using the scales to get it as close to 50 as possible, going through it until I was near 50, and then recognizing when I started my pattern again, and that's where I'd cut it off. So yeah, set of scales is really good. You can also then like work out how much yarn you're using, so when you go and buy more yarn, you know whether you've got enough for a project. So simple thing, really useful. And the last thing, which is my absolute favourite, I got this Knit Pro one. I'm not paid to endorse anything, I just found that this was an affordable one to get. A yarn winder. So it comes with the centrepiece that needs to go on here. I'm not going to stick it in because it can take a little bit of wiggling to get it in place, so it's nice and secure at least. And then you're sticking it onto the table here, clamping it in place, spinning that round, get your yarn through there and then wind. And it will take those balls of yarn and make them into nice little cakes. So 2 50-gram cakes from a 100-gram ball, for example. The other thing is that you can, if you're really lucky and you get a centerpole ball of yarn, this is such a quick process. It takes like 15 minutes to wind them up, and it just means as well that like it's not going to bounce around on the table, because you can just pull it out the center of the cake. So you wind it up by holding in these notches. This notch will then be up at the top whilst the cake is forming here, so you can either pull from the outside of the cake or you can pull from the top of the cake. So yeah, you have those options to like make something that isn't center pull into something that is center pull, so it's easier to use in the long run. It's not something that you need to invest in to do yarn crafts, but I certainly found that for things like socks where I'm knitting two that need to be the same or as close to the same as possible, that this was something that was so worth getting. And like, you guys know that I made a lot of socks for Christmas. This last Christmas gone, so you know that like this has paid for itself now. The amount of frustration that working with those socks would have been without a yarn winder, I can't even imagine. So yeah, that is all for today. Those are just some little teeny, like just little things that make yarn crafts easier for me, in my opinion. Obviously you don't need to use any of these to still have a nice crochet and knitting experience, but that's totally up to you if you want to go and look out for some of this stuff in future. And yeah, that's it for this week. I can't wait to show you the progress of the stuff I've been working on. I really can't, because I just feel like it's really got me back in. Going through my stash, working out what I need to get through, it's just really helped me sort of like pick myself up and get more crafting done. So I can't wait to show you what I've been up to, but that has to wait for another video. For now, I will see you soon. Bye.